One Last Fling definitely gives us one of the best Diane costumes. This is the 18th episode of the 5th season of Cheers, directed, of course, by the brilliant James Burrows. And there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts along the way. There is nothing I didn't like about this episode. Granted, that's usually the case with Cheers, and I'm very much soaking up every bit of Diane that I can because we are getting painfully close to the end of season 5. But, as an aside, very excitingly for me, I've got my hands on both Kelly and Good Advice. These are 2 sitcoms starring Shelley Long. I have just finished watching every Shelley Long film, and then I found these 2 sitcoms, and I will be watching 1 episode a week. That means I have enough Shelley Long to last me until the end of this year. Absolutely over the moon. But I am continuing to soak up as much Diane as possible, nevertheless. And this one revolves around Sam's bachelor party. It actually starts off with Frasier going into Cheers, and Woody has his arm in a cast, and Woody tells a very long-winded story about how this happened, but apparently Woody Harrelson was actually in a cast. He did have his arm bandaged up because of an actual injury, which was, well, I guess unfortunate for him, but I like that they were able to write it into the show. We then have the main narrative being established pretty quickly, and that's the fact that it focuses on Sam and Diane. Carla is waiting for Diane to get into work so she can go to traffic school. We don't get a lot of Carla in this episode, but considering the previous 2 episodes, Never Love a Goalie Part 1 and 2, were basically all about Carla, I don't mind that too much. Sam and Diane then come back from picking china patterns. Do you say Sam and Diane or Diane and Sam? It's a random question, but in my notes I always write Diane and Sam, but when I say it out loud, I think I always say Sam and Diane. I don't know. I'm going to be looking out for that in the future, but if you say it one way, I'd love to know which way you say it. It's irrelevant to this episode. They were picking out china patterns. Diane then makes him go into the office to discuss towels, and that's when Cliff suggests that they have a bachelor party at Cheers. And somebody suggests they get a girl in a cake, and Woody suggests that the girl should be Miss Chambers. And Diane then comes out of the office and she says one of my many favourite Dianisms, and she says, and I quote, "Oh Sam, stop being such a grumble bunny, just grit your teeth and pick out a dust ruffle." Absolutely adorable. Woody then asks Diane if she wants to be the girl in the cake, and initially she says no, but then Woody says to the others, she says no, we need to find somebody else, and that's when Diane realises that she'd rather be the girl in the cake than have some other girl pop out of Sam's cake. So this is the plan they're going with. We then cut to the evening, late in the evening, and suddenly everybody scarpers. Everybody leaves Cheers, and Sam goes into the back room to count the receipts or whatever he was doing, and Woody goes to the front door and tells them they can come back in, and it is the quickest erected party ever. I didn't time it, I should have timed it, but I want to say it took them less than 10 seconds to get Cheers all dressed up for the party, which is really incredible. Sam then comes out and they have this party, they bring the cake out. It looks gorgeous, absolutely stunning. And Sam approaches it and Norm makes a throwaway comment that shapes the rest of the episode. And Norm says, after this, it's only one woman for the rest of your life. And then Sam starts to overthink it. And he starts to go off on one about how it'll only ever be one perfume and one set of earlobes. And Norm, bless him, without wanting to give the game away, basically shouts at him to shut up because he knows that Diane is in the cake and she can hear all of this. And also, it must have been exceptionally uncomfortable to be inside of that cake. And Sam says, okay, let's go for it. And with incredible precision, up pops Diane like a jack in the box. And I actually watched it about 4 or 5 times because the execution was just absolutely fantastic. And we have this gorgeous outfit. I love the colour choice. It just looks amazing. And the expression. And what I also love about this is not just the expression on Shelley Long's face, But it's the fact that her gaze fell immediately upon him. Obviously, there would have been rehearsals. Ted Danson would have been standing on his mark. But still, I feel like if you're going to jump up out of being encased in somewhere, it's going to take a second to train your vision on where you want it to go. And there was just no hesitation whatsoever. And it was just absolutely beautiful. Really thoroughly enjoyed that. Diane didn't really enjoy that moment. And I think understandably, she stormed out, and we then cut to the next day. Carla comes in, then Diane comes in. She wants to speak to Sam in his office. And what I think is quite telling is that Diane kind of parrots all of these things back to Sam about the perfume and the earlobes. And I think she's clearly committed this to memory. I don't think she would have intentionally done that. I think that is just Diane, if she hears these, not necessarily criticisms, but negative comments about her, she's going to cling on to them, which I think is very much a Diane thing. And Sam tries to save the situation by comparing it to popcorn, which is a rather, well, on the one hand, I get it. But at the same time, what are you doing, Sam? Diane then proposes something, and she says it in a very Diane way. And she suggests, would 24 hours of wild, uninhibited, hedonistic, sexual carousing with anything in a tube top suffice? And Sam asked her, are you serious? And I think that's a very valid question for two reasons. One, it's just a strange thing to suggest anyway. Two, it wouldn't be unlike Diane to try and trick him. That it was a test to see if he would do it, and if he did do it, she'd say, you don't love me, you can imagine being with somebody else, you were with somebody else. So I think it's fair for Sam to be hesitant. But what happens next is so adorable. Well, before we get to that bit, Sam asks, when do my 24 hours begin? And Diane replies, right now, the same as mine. That's fair. If Sam has this opportunity, if he has these 24 hours to be with somebody and get it out of his system, it's only fair that Diane has the same as well. We then cut to just the end of that 24-hour period, and I love this moment. It's unacceptable of Sam, but I love it. Diane comes in with a character called Rick, who we learn had just given her a lift to Cheers because her car wasn't working. And as soon as Sam sees Rick, he pounces on him. And I've never seen Sam move so quickly. And it definitely, in that moment, helped to show that he had very clearly spent those 24 hours thinking about Diane, agonising over what she might be doing. And I think that is so telling about how he truly feels about her. Because I think there are times when one could reasonably question whether or not he actually does want to marry her. Or if it's just, I guess, a convenience because of how ludicrous their relationship has been. But I firmly believe that he does love her, regardless of what happens after this, regardless of what has happened before. Genuinely believe that Sam loves Diane. And he then practically drags her into his office. And honestly, his behaviour is a bit erratic at this point, but Diane is just pretty much smiling throughout the whole thing, which is absolutely adorable. And Sam confesses pretty quickly that he didn't do anything during the 24 hours. And then, unacceptably, he calls Diane a tart multiple times. And he even reveals that he knows she didn't go home because he spent the night outside her apartment. And it is fair for him to assume that that's because she was with somebody else. She had the same rights throughout the 24 hours as he did. So I think his assumption there was fair, even though I think calling her a tart would be completely unreasonable. And then we find out that Diane knew he was watching the apartment. And that's because Diane was watching Sam watching the apartment. And it's just absolutely adorable. And they're both idiots. Because that is just a ludicrous way to spend an evening. And in the best possible way, they completely deserve each other. But I love them both tremendously. And then we end with Sam playfully chasing Diane out of the office. And it's adorable. And it's an absolute delight. Things for Sam and Diane have been going so well. Pretty much, I mean, the engagement ring issue aside, that was a bit awkward. But pretty much since the courtroom, things have been going so well between them. They haven't had any big arguments. things haven't gone wrong, it makes me nervous. I say that I know what happens in this season and beyond, but it definitely, it feels too pleasant. But I'll say no more about that. Brilliant episode. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. A lot of wonderful moments with Diane in this, and I rather had a lot of fun with this. Beautiful, beautiful episode. Some really great quotes. It's pretty fabulous.